Welcome to AI in the Real World, how enterprise software customers are using AI in production today.
Well, hello. Today on AI in the Real World, I am joined by one of the most respected and refreshingly unfiltered voices in enterprise transformation, Eric Kimberling. As the founder of Third Stage Consulting, Eric has guided organizations through some of the world's most complex digital projects. And today, we're tackling a big question. Is the consulting industry headed for a crash? And how is AI accelerating that disruption? Get ready for a bold conversation about what's broken and what is to come. Eric, welcome.
Hi, Bonnie. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. So let's get right into it. Is traditional consulting and the traditional consulting model broken?
Yes.
Okay.
Would you like me to elaborate?
Yes, please do. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, I think, consulting has been an industry that I've had a love-hate relationship with. On one hand, it's all I've ever done. My entire career has been in consulting. So that part I love. I love what I do. I love our industry. But I also think there's some warts in a dark side to our industry, particularly as it relates to value versus cost and managing client expectations and giving clients ownership of their own projects. I think there's just a lot of issues that have been percolating under the surface of the consulting industry, and it's almost an unspoken problem that hasn't really been addressed until now. And with AI, the reason I think it's bringing all those things to the surface is now with AI, the model doesn't quite work, especially for the large consulting firms, that heavily rely on offshoring resources and or really junior consultants to do a lot of their manual grunt work. That's where a lot of these big firms make most of their money. And so now with AI coming in, AI can automate and replace a lot of what those low-level consultants were doing and also what some of the offshore resources were doing too. So I think that's putting a lot of downward cost pressure on the consulting industry. And we're already seeing it on our side. We see it with other system integrators and big consulting firms. But I think at the end of the day, it's going to benefit the clients, which is a good thing longer term.
Yeah, I think so. And really potentially reduce the cost of implementing some of these large projects.
Right.
What do you feel the sentiment is among your peers? So, other SIs in the industry or management consulting firms. I mean, is it A, bullish, B, bearish, or is there a mix?
I'd say for me, and I'm curious to hear what the audience thinks too, but for me, it's a mix. I mean, I think on one hand, there's still going to be a role for consulting in general, even with AI providing knowledge at people's fingertips, and even with generative AI replacing a lot of what consultants had historically made a lot of money doing. Even with that in mind, I still think there's a lot of value that consultants can bring, but that's the key word, is they have to find a way to deliver value in an AI-driven world using AI in many cases. And so I think it's actually going to put a premium on the really good consultants, the ones that are really good and have always delivered value, or the ones that can step up and start delivering more value. I think those consulting firms are going to do really well. And the ones that are going to suffer are the ones that are the bigger ones. So I think the smaller, boutique-y, mid-sized consulting firms too, I think they're probably a little bit more bullish about this whole thing. But I think if I'm a partner at Accenture, Deloitte, or one of the big consulting firms, I'm feeling pretty bearish right now because I know that I've got tens, if not hundreds of thousands of employees that could be displaced as a result of AI. And that takes away the cash cow that I've, built for however many years as a partner. So I think that's where I think it's a bit of a mix and a double-edged sword, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, and I think gone are the days where there's just a blank check for consulting. And this idea that consultants can tell you what you need without really executing and being responsible for the outcome along with you. I think that is something, gone. And in the past, we're even seeing, government contracts now really being curtailed, especially, I think I saw something like, $1.2 billion that Deloitte had with the government, just evaporated in the era of DOGE. And so I think that sentiment is really widespread across the board, from government to any organization, where, boards and, the executive stakeholders are no longer saying, hey, you can have the luxury to now bring in a whole team of people, to throw at this project, unless you can show a one-to-one return or greater than that, for sure.
Yeah, and it's interesting that of all types of organizations that have really exposed and asked the question, what kind of value are we getting from consulting firms? It's interesting to me that it happens to be the US federal government is one of the ones leading the charge in that regard. And I would have expected the private sector to have done that years or decades ago, but they just haven't. So, say what you will about, Elon Musk, Doge, all that stuff. I don't want to get political, but I do think that the good thing in all that is that it has raised the question for private sector organizations as well. Are we getting value out of our consultants? And these consultants, this army of consultants that I've had in my office here for the last 3-4 years that have just sort of been parked and hanging out in my office, do they need to be here? What am I getting for that cost? And it's amazing to me how many big corporations just let the consulting army just keep billing by the hour and keep doing their thing without really any clear accountability and transparency. But again, with AI, I think that changes things, because now you have to start asking, if I've got 20 people from a consulting firm on a project, do I need all 20 of them? I had 20 before AI became a thing, and I still have 20 on my project. Does that make sense? Probably not. And so I think organizations need to start asking those tough questions about, do I need 20 people on this project when AI can do a lot of the work here?
Yeah. Well, and Eric, you and I have been saying this for years about, even before the era of AI, about some of these massive contracts and just how much waste goes into, these years long implementations that, customers really shouldn't be having to foot the bill for. And I think the era of AI has just caused everybody to double down on the fact that we don't need armies of people to have successful projects anymore. And so it's sort of trimming the fat, so to speak, probably where there was a lot of opportunity to do that in the past as well. One of the things that I really struggle with, especially with the big SIs, is just this lack of transparency and an opaqueness around these projects. And the only time that you really hear about any of them is when there's some massive failure and lawsuits and it hits the press. But I feel a real reticence, maybe up until this point, that the big SIs have to getting reviewed about the success of their projects. I mean, Eric, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. I mean, I think one thing that stuck with me, and I know you and I have talked about this in the past, or recently we talked about this. There's an article that I saw somewhere out of the UK where they were basically reporting on the fact that there was some blowback from some PwC clients in the UK in particular, because I guess their head of AI at PwC was touting how, they're going to save 30% or more time and cost in these consulting engagements because of AI. But those costs weren't necessarily the cost savings weren't necessarily being passed on to customers. So customers and clients were coming back saying, hey, what about our share of that savings? That, you're still billing us the same amount, you're still costing the same amount, but yet you're out there touting how much money you're going to save with AI. So I think that's just something to be aware of. And I think that totally disrupts the traditional consulting model, like I said. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Well, we have a couple of exhibits here. So, Peter Thiel, the co-founder of Palantir, said if the consulting business was a stock, I'd be shorting it right now. We have another one that, I saw out on LinkedIn actually yesterday, where Accenture came out as saying that CEOs are postponing hiring consultants due to uncertainty. So, there's some volatility, just as you talked about at the very top, the big consulting firms, and certainly in management consulting. In light of that, what are some of the traits of consultants, or the skills that are thriving right now? Where's the boom? I mean, we talked about where the bust is. Where are organizations seeing real value in these engagements and with consultants?
Yeah, well, the good news with the cost savings that organizations are seeing with the efficiencies or the potential greater efficiencies of the new consulting model with AI is that it, like I said before, puts a premium on those things that are super high value that can't be replaced by AI, at least not yet. So things like defining a digital strategy that's aligned with your business and not necessarily just going down a one size fits all path. That's where consultants can add a huge amount of value. Now, granted, if we're going into a client now and we're doing an assessment of their operations to try and understand who they are and what they're doing and understanding their needs and requirements and priorities, admittedly, AI is making that a lot faster and cheaper for us, which means less revenue for us as an organization. But it adds so much value because now the clients aren't paying for us to do this grunt work to document requirements and to do all this detailed stuff. Instead, we can focus on what's in our heads and ask the right questions and lead the clients in the right direction using AI to do a lot of the lower value work. So I think you have to look at what's the high value stuff. It's digital strategy. It's the implementation planning. Once you choose what your transformation roadmap is going to look like, AI can give you some inputs, yes, but you still need that human touch of understanding the nuances that AI just isn't going to understand. And you also have to remember too, AI is being unintentionally trained on some flawed assumptions from the past. Historically, digital transformations haven't gone well. So that same data is what's feeding AI in terms of how long a project might take or how much it's going to cost. A lot of that's going to be based on marketing and sales spin from the vendors that have fed into these AI models. And so if you ask AI, it's probably going to give you that a little bit of a bias towards what the vendors might say on their sales side, because that's what's available, for training AI.
Yeah.
So you need that human strategy side to decipher that and to look at the nuances. And then the big one that you and I have talked about too is change management. When it comes to change management, AI can help with user adoption in terms of creating more, robust training materials or customizing training materials. I think that's a huge lift for AI within the world of change management. But that's just one part of change management. You also have to understand the culture. You have to understand how you're going to organize job roles and responsibilities. And all along the way, you can be using AI to do this, but it's that strategy, that human side of it, and that human knowledge that adds a ton of value. So I look at it as like the low value stuff is probably going to go away. It should go away ASAP. And then the high value strategic type stuff is what stays in this post AI consulting world.
Yeah. Yeah. I wholeheartedly agree with that. And, you can teach the AI and get agents to tackle workflows and act autonomously, but you can never train them to help you navigate the political landscape that's necessary to get a change made within the organization and a change adopted and embraced. And I think that is where the cream is rising to the top, so to speak, in terms of the consulting world. It's those resources that you can bring in to help a customer make a very wise, sound decision that's not trained on old, bad, failed implementations, but what's latest and greatest, and really understands the inner workings of an organization and how things work that you can't train an AI on necessarily to get a mass scale change rolled out. And I think that's where consulting firms and the individuals that they bring to projects, that's where they earn their money.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Eric, you own a consulting business, right? With a large team that you're working with. So in terms of, building, if let's say that you were to build the consulting firm today, what would you do to be AI native and future proof? What are some of the things that I know, Eric, you are doing at Third Stage to be AI native and future proof?
Well, you and I have known each other a long time, and you know that I don't typically freak out or get too excited about the latest buzzwords, and I don't typically fall for the vendor hype, all that stuff. AI, though, I'll be honest, is a little bit different. I think AI is one where once ChatGPT really burst onto the scene at the consumer level, what was that, 2.5 years ago? And it became, you started seeing ChatGPT show up in pop culture and TV shows and things like that. You knew it was like, this is a real thing. Like, this is here to stay. The whole AI thing, the generative AI, and it keeps advancing so quickly. So I knew it reminds me a little bit of COVID. During COVID, I was pretty worried about how is that going to affect consulting, because we make so much of our process is dependent on being in person with clients, and obviously during COVID we couldn't do that, so that was very disruptive, and we had to completely shift our model, not only in terms of how we delivered, but also in terms of how we sold to clients and the types of clients we sold to, because big companies were a lot more freaked out and panicked during COVID. Whereas small and mid-sized companies were still they were more likely to move ahead and move quickly. So we intentionally shifted our total marketing strategy and went after the small and mid-market in the interim while we were working our way through COVID. And then we went back to, a better mix of large and small clients. Reason I bring that up is you have to react quickly. And I don't know that these big consulting firms are going to be able to react fast enough. And so it actually is a really good time, I think, to start a consulting firm. Typically during periods of uncertainty, that's when people are retrenching. Like you just said with Accenture, they're not being aggressive in their growth. They're not looking to the future in terms of how they can grow the company, at least in the short term. So that's a great opportunity for someone to come in and say, hey, I'm going to start something right now and create some momentum when everyone else is retrenching. I think Warren Buffett touts that all the time. Like, this is a good time to be in the industry because it's on a downturn, and you want to be there to ride the wave back up. All that to say, what we've done, and what I think any entrepreneur should do if you're thinking about starting a consulting firm, is we have completely embraced AI, and we've actually, I'm a big believer in this whole idea of creative destruction, where one of the core concepts of innovation, according to Clayton Christensen, who I think he passed away recently, but he was a Harvard professor, and he's written books about this whole concept of innovation. But his whole philosophy is, you're going to get disrupted either way. So why don't you try to disrupt yourself and control the narrative and control the tempo of how that happens? And so that's what we've done. Is we said AI is going to mess with our world, and it is messing with our world as we speak. We can either ignore it and hope it just sort of passes or doesn't hurt us as bad as we think it may, or we can lean all the way into it and say, we're actually going to help further this along and speed it up. And with the idea that in the long game, even though short term it does affect our revenue, it reduces the number of hours we bill. Longer term, I know that's going to add a lot more value. Back to your earlier question about where is the value, that's what we're focused on: change management, strategy, implementation planning at phase 0, even process improvements and the strategy behind that. That high value stuff is stuff we're already good at. So let's go ahead and automate the stuff that we're good at, but clients don't need it. It doesn't add a lot of value. AI can do it for us. Let's lean into it, automate it, knowing it's going to hurt us short term, but long term clients will be happier, and it should help our business model longer term. So that's what I would say any new consultant should be thinking about AI, and also thinking about where's the value, because I think people are going to really start questioning consultants in general, especially because there's going to be a perception that, as smart as you and I are, Bonnie, could I get that same knowledge out on ChatGPT? Could I just go to Perplexity and ask it some stuff that I might otherwise pay you or I to get answers to? And so that's the way you have to think about it, is how do you make yourself different and indispensable, knowing that nowadays people can just go to ChatGPT and get answers they're looking for right away.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think, thinking about building a scalable business, right? I mean, there's some really neat things about being able to take all of our experience and clone it and make it available. But then how do we scale something that can be of value, which gives that away, but also, allows that human in the loop to add the real value, the stuff that people want to pay for. The knowledge is cheap. The execution is expensive. And I think there, that's where consulting firms, when they can prove that they've executed and they have proof points of that. So other customers will say, and provide verification of that. That is where the value in the future is going to be.
Yeah, for sure. And that's well said. The execution, a lot of execution can be automated and replaced by AI, even something like development, coding, building integrations, even a lot of what we do as far as, like I said before, the assessment of the current state. How are your processes working today? I do 100 interviews with 100 different work groups throughout the organization. An AI agent's capturing that, and an AI agent will give me the information I need and summarize it to give me a starting point. And that just saved me, dozens of hours, if not more, probably a lot more than that, actually, in terms of not having to manually go create that stuff anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think final wrap up question. What's new at Third Stage? I know that you've been working on some really exciting things. Anything you want to share with our audience?
Yeah. So, one thing is that I alluded to is our AI tool set. It's called Mission Control AI. We use it on all of our new engagements now. So it's a way for us to speed up the process in terms of capturing everything in all the workshops and meetings we have, and really using that as a knowledge base and a automation tool to create a lot of the deliverables we do, so that we can focus ourselves and our efforts on analyzing and thinking and getting to know the client rather than documenting PowerPoint slides and Visio diagrams and all that stuff. We still have to do some of that, but a lot of that can go away now. So that's one thing, is that Mission Control AI tool set that I think is a big differentiator for us, because most consulting firms haven't. Some of them are advising on AI to their clients, but they're not necessarily embracing AI themselves. And so that's an important point. And then the other thing is we're actually, I can't give too many details yet because we're not announcing it until Monday officially, but I'll share it with your audience as a teaser or as a preview. But we are launching on Monday a staffing arm within Third Stage that will be basically complementary or supplementary to our consulting division. So we'll have a consulting division, then we'll have a staffing and a staff augmentation arm, where if someone needs a CIO or an internal project manager or a vendor specific or a product specific architect or project lead, whatever the case may be, we can provide those staffing, the talent and resources to clients internally. And it's part of our overall goal and mission to help clients take ownership of their projects. So as much as we want them to use us for our consulting services, we also know that we don't want them to be overly dependent on us. We know that they ultimately need to own these projects and the transformations going forward. So we want to provide that staff aug and that staffing placement service to clients who are trying to build out their IT teams to support their longer term transformation. So those are the two big things. I mean, we always have stuff going on, but those are the two biggest ones happening right now. Exciting.
That's awesome. Well, looking forward to hearing where that goes, because I think, the whole idea of staff aug has a lot of legs in this current market space. I did want to say hello to so many of our viewers, and I've gotten a ton of comments out here. So I want to, first of all, acknowledge those. So we've had some viewers from as far as Cape Town. So hello, and to you. One of the comments that we got was, the knowledge we use to rely on consultants is at our fingertips now. The critical activities like process mapping, fit gap, and most importantly, change management still need people, I think. And I wholeheartedly agree with that sentiment. Eric, anything to add there?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree too. And what's great about AI is it can give you that starting point to now focus more time on everything that Bharat had just said here. The process analysis, the fit gap, the change management, even the project management. Yeah, you could have AI help create a Gantt chart for you and identify the dependencies, but you still need that brain. You still need that human brain to say, yeah, but that doesn't quite make sense. Maybe in most cases that would have made sense on a Gantt chart or in that sequence or that duration. But knowing what I know about this client, I know that it's going to take longer for this reason or whatever. So I think it gives us more time now to spend less time scrambling to say, oh, crap, I have to go create all these deliverables, so that I can then analyze everything. Now, if the deliverables are largely created for you, at least a draft version, now I can spend more time thinking and helping the client with their unique problems.
Yep, absolutely. And our good friend, Brian Summer, is here. Hey, Brian. What he has brought up is a whole new set of controls are needed here so that staffers don't submit work products they're not fully vetted. correct, and will help clients. I've already seen senior people blindly using AI results that were wildly incorrect. Is it time to expand the person in the middle definition for consultants? I think that is a huge point. I think greater ways to onboard young staffers into positions in the past that were held by more senior folks and they're relying on AI. Blindly using AI results is going to go very badly. Eric, what do you think?
And I think this is the biggest risk for those junior level consultants that are going to depend too much on ChatGPT or AI in general. First of all, before I get too far into this, did you ever see that movie Elf? The Christmas movie Elf? And then they announced that Santa Claus is coming to the mall, and Will Ferrell freaks out and says, "I know him." That's how I felt when I saw Brian's name pop up. I was like, I know him. So I know you do too. So hello, Brian. And that's a good question. But the blindly using AI results that are incorrect is a real thing. And we've already seen some consulting firms get in trouble for that because not only because their analysis is wrong, but in some cases they've shared sensitive information in these open AI models, which you have to be careful of too as a consultant. Is you have a responsibility to keep client information private. And if you get a bunch of 23, 24-year-olds that don't understand that if I plug in all the financial results of the company or all their IP into an open AI model, I've violated that confidentiality. So there's a lot to think about there though, but you do need, I think it's going to push up responsibility to the more senior people that actually have a lot of experience and know what they're doing. And unfortunately, I hate to say this, but I think it's going to make it a lot more difficult for people to break into the consulting industry, which sucks because I broke into it by being that naive 24-year-old. And as much as I rail on the big consulting firms for bringing in the school bus of kids, I was once on that school bus and got off the school bus and went straight to a client and started billing on day one. So it helped me, but it didn't help my clients. And that's part of why I have mixed feelings about this whole thing. So I guess that's career development wise. We're going to have to figure out a new way to groom younger people, because it's not going to be by bringing on an army of young kids that we can get billable right away.
Yeah. Although, I think both you and I have talked about, our own kids and some of the skill set that they have that is going to be really useful. I know my son is interning for me this summer at Raven, and what he's brought to the table in terms of, AI native research is really interesting. So I think there's going to be a place for him. We just need to figure out where that is within the world of consulting. And I think the good students and good, young people with a solid work ethic will always have a place in our market.
Especially if they find ways to master AI and how they can bridge their knowledge with AI. I mean, that's such a powerful combo right now. It's not one or the other. You can't just be smart but not use AI. You can't just know how to use AI really well and not be smart. You need both. And so that's a good point.
Yeah. Another comment. I think the focus shifts from bringing frameworks and process to the table to implementation and change management. I don't know of the politics that will go away, but that's as much an internal issue. And I think we absolutely talked about that before, Eric, in terms of, no robot can navigate the political football that is, happens during these projects.
Yeah. It's like, what are you going to do? Put in ChatGPT? My executive team is completely dysfunctional and they're a bunch of jerks. What should I do? I'd love to see ChatGPT's response to that. And I'd love to see an actionable plan that you could actually go do something about it. So. Yeah.
And of course, a pithy statement by Brian, as always, AI still can't read the room. Its IQ is challenged today, and its EQ is non-existent. So that emotional quotient is non-existent. Well said, for sure.
Yeah, that is. And that EQ is back to your earlier question of what skills are going to be most important for consultants. The EQ, it has always been really important and underrated. I think it becomes even more important going forward.
Yep. Without question, that's EQ is expensive, and that's what a good consultant will bring. So Douglas Muir, I'm excited about the prospect of being able to bring in big consulting type of services to small and medium businesses. There's a great opportunity of making transformation accessible. Cannot agree and more. Douglas, and that's one of the things that Eric talked about earlier. This is a great time to be entrepreneurial in the consulting space because AI has democratized knowledge and it's available to everyone. So I think it's amazing what small independent firms have the capacity to do that compete, handedly with the big SIs. Eric, what's for you?
Yeah, I think it's easier to prove value and relative to cost, especially. If you can show that you can do more with less money for clients, that's going to be a big upside to the newer upstarts.
Yep. So Jonathan Michaels, the main thing is that LLMs cannot provide strategy, as this is IP for many consulting firms, similar to research and understanding how to connect the dots. Eric, what's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's back to the earlier point about AI, the open AI models being trained by some of the past work and past assumptions and past results, which aren't good in the digital transformation space, especially, or business transformation consulting in general. So a lot of what these open AI models are learning from is going to be things that vendors might have thrown out there in the past, or overly optimistic scenarios that technical consultants have thrown out there. So it's going to take some time for AI to catch up to really even understand what the reality is and the correlations are between success and failure and all that good stuff.
Yeah. Good thought there, Jonathan. So what about AI threatens you? It's an area to be mastered to control it. What are the risks, Eric, that you think AI has potential to do within some of these projects?
Well, I think one is the one you mentioned earlier, which is the delusions and inaccurate information, or not delusions, I always call them delusions. Yeah. Hallucinations. The hallucinations from AI and then inaccurate information. If you don't know, especially if you're younger, entry level, and you don't know that that's a hallucination or that's not accurate or it's not complete, whatever, and you put your big company name on it, rubber stamp of approval, it's going to create this false comfort when an executive sees a result or an analysis or whatever. So there's danger there. You have to know that your consulting firm is not only using AI, but using it really wisely, and that you have really wise people behind that. So I think that's a big thing. And then, of course, I worry about all this deep fake type stuff. I mean, that's more of it. That goes way beyond consulting. That's just more like, you see a video of someone saying something that's not true, but is AI generated. And these tools are getting so good at that. I worry about like people like you and I that are very publicly facing, and certainly, we're small fish in the sea. There's other people that have a lot more to lose than you and I. But imagine if someone put a deep fake AI generated video, just like you did in the intro, the video of you with the robot. I mean, it made me think maybe you have a robot, but that was AI generated at the beginning of the podcast.
I wish I did. I would have to be doing my laundry right now.
I know. I was like, that's super fancy. Even though it's just AI, that's still cool.
Yeah.
But that'll get so good over time that I think people will have trouble deciphering between reality and deep fake type stuff. So but that goes way beyond consulting. That's a bigger society type discussion. That might be a whole nother podcast for discussion.
It sure is. And, I own a reviews business, right? So we review these projects and we have customers writing reviews about the consultants. And that's one of the things that we are on high alert for is fake reviews. And in the age of AI, it is so easy. And I look at some of our peers in the reviews business area, and it's legit a concern. So, I think there's some risks with the AI, but putting safeguards around our data and protections around certainly customer data and what is used in and out of these LLMs is A1A.
Yeah.
Emerson. So hi, thanks for being here. For me, if you don't add value through consulting, you are on the verge of self-destruct, which brings many niche, like third stage, asking raw questions to lead to real issues and not to technology issues. So Eric, talk a little bit about being tech agnostic and, what is putting what Emerson is saying here in terms of niche consultants like Third Stage.
Yeah, so we're tech agnostic and independent, so we're not affiliated with any software vendors. We know them all very well. We work with all the major players in terms of helping clients evaluate and implement those systems, but we're not affiliated. So we don't have any skin in the game as far as making sure we recommend one product over another. Most consulting firms are affiliated with one or more software vendors, and we're not. So that's important because it's a trusted advisor role, true trusted advisor role for our clients. We only represent our clients, not the vendors, and that's our job. So the key here is, like, we know that focusing a ton of time and money on technology isn't going to do you a lot of good if you don't focus on everything else. People, process, strategy, alignment, all the stuff that we could spend hours talking about. And that's the real value we bring. And that's something that's a lot harder to automate via AI. In fact, I don't think you can automate most of that. Again, there's some analysis work, documentation work of ours that is now being automated with AI, but generally speaking, the real value we provide is not something that can be automated. I can automate a lot of the technology build, the configuration, customization, integration, data migration, all that stuff. I can figure out ways for AI to really speed that up, but that's great. It is going to reduce time and cost on that side, but it's the other stuff that's more difficult and harder, and it typically ends up costing more time, money, and risk. So that's the way I look at it.
But that with the value that you bring to the table, there's an equal investment on the side of the client, because it does add such tremendous value.
Right.
So I think our last thought in terms of a wrap up here from our viewer comments. And thanks everybody for being here. LLMs do not challenge your decisions, as they tend to err on the side of being biased. Would definitely agree with that. That's a recipe for disaster when considering real life business challenges. The one thing I would add to this, though, is that you can ask LLMs to challenge your decisions and to play both sides. And I think that's one of the things that potentially, is more helpful, because I think as humans, we sometimes err on the side of being biased as well. So, Eric, what do you think?
Yeah, it's you have to recognize that and remember that AI, as valuable as it is, as much as I personally really love working with AI, you have to recognize too that all the data it has, or most of it, is based on information and data created by humans, which humans are inherently biased. Mm-hmm. So you just by association are going to have a bias with AI tools, especially, like I said, if with these sorts of projects. How long does the average ERP implementation take? It's probably going to give you a biased answer that sales reps have been touting in the marketplace for the last 20 years, which is severely underestimated. It's not, although I will say, good news, bad news for like Raven Intel is that, you're one of the few sources of truly objective, unbiased data. And so, and I know your stuff is your intellectual property. So it's not going to feed into an AI model in the same way. But if there were more sources like that out there, then you could start talking about, okay, that is truly agnostic, independent, unbiased information, because people rated their actual results, and they shared it with you on your website, and therefore made it, that would make AI more accurate. But in the meantime, short of having more data out there, like your data set, it's just going to be a lot of bias out there.
Yeah, absolutely. So Eric, final wrap up thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, AI is great. It's probably going to disrupt all of our worlds, not just in consulting, certainly in technology, manufacturing, HR, whatever space you're in, AI will affect it. It's just a matter of how much and when. So I would say just embrace it, learn as much as you can about it, and figure out ways to get ahead of it, as far as how can you embrace it and sort of ride the wave. I post a lot about AI on my YouTube channel. It is interesting to see how many people speak negatively about AI. So there's still a lot of people that are like, I don't trust AI. AI is overhyped. And they might be right. I'm not saying I'm necessarily right, but it is interesting to hear that. But if I'm them, I might reconsider. Like, I may not like AI. I may not want it to take over the world, but I have to assume it might, and it probably will. So let's act accordingly. And worst case scenario, if you're wrong, there's really no harm in that. So I would say just get ahead of it as much as you can, and make sure you're adding value. If you're a system integrator or consultant, make sure you're adding tons of value, because clients are going to be looking at us consultants and us, technical implementers are going to be looking at us with a magnifying glass of why are you spending this much of our money when I've got a tool set over here that maybe I could do more of that work myself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I would add to that, good consulting firms, there's no bust or crash coming from them. Good consulting firms, I think there's a boom. And they're the ones, a good consulting firm can offer a value that a customer isn't able to realize on their own, because there's tremendous expertise that's brought in. So third stage is one of those. Certainly, we have many out on Raven Intel that tell that story as well, through the voice of customers and through the value that customers have said it's brought them. So Eric, thank you so much for being with us today. Check out Third Stage Consulting, thirdstageconsulting.com. If you have a project that is upcoming or you need staff augmentation for some of the digital initiatives that you have. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.